Hello and thank you for joining us today. I'm Jamie O'Brien for The Record. Today we're speaking with Perth Archbishop Timothy Costelloe, President of the Plenary Council. Thank you very much for joining us today, Your Grace.
You're welcome, Jamie.
Your Grace, what do you hope will be the response of the Perth Catholic community to the First Assembly in the coming weeks and months?
Well, as many people are probably aware, Jamie, this is the first assembly, as you say. The second and final assembly is in early July next year. So there's about 8 months between the two formal assemblies. They're sort of bookending the whole process. So what I'm really hoping for is that all of the fruits that emerge from the first assembly will become part of two things, really. The prayer of the people of the Archdiocese of Perth, because this isn't just an ordinary kind of meeting, this is a major event for the life of the Church. So if it's not founded in prayer and grounded in prayer, we've missed the boat in a sense. So I'm hoping that the people of the diocese, all of the Catholic people of our local church will continue to pray and pray really deeply for the success of the Plenary Council. But also as some of the fruits of the first assembly begin to emerge, and people are asked perhaps to engage with them or respond to them in whatever ways that takes place, I hope many people will take that opportunity. We had a great response to the initial listening and dialogue and listening and discernment processes. Now, these processes after the first assembly will probably be a little bit different, but there'll still be opportunities to engage, and I really hope people do.
So then, thinking about the work and the role of the Council, what are some of the strengths you've seen in the past few days of this first assembly and of the members and the process so far?
Well, this of course is an event that's going on across the whole church in Australia. And as many people would know, many parts of the country are still in lockdown. And so for some people, it's a very challenging and in one sense isolating experience because we're all online. In other places, like here in Perth, we are able to gather together, and we've gathered at the Catholic Education offices here in Leederville, and that's a wonderful blessing for us. So one of the strengths for us is the ability to be with each other over morning tea, at lunchtime, those sorts of things, and to celebrate Mass together at the end of each day. I think one of the main strengths, though, is the process. And it's an unusual process and one that most of us are not familiar with, and many other people wouldn't be either, because it's a process of discernment. All along we've been stressing that this experience of the Council is an experience of discernment where together, as the people of the Church, we're trying to listen for the voice of the Holy Spirit. And that comes through all kinds of different avenues, if you like. Primarily at the Council, it's coming through each other's voices. And so that needs the ability to speak boldly, as our Plenary Council prayer invites us to do. But I think even more importantly, the willingness to listen deeply, even when what we're hearing might be a bit uncomfortable or a bit surprising or even a bit worrying, because it's through all of these different ways that we will find the voice of the Holy Spirit emerging. It's not that we just parrot whatever the Holy Spirit says to us in our brains or in our hearts, but we speak the truth and our insights as best we can. Often they're contradictory, they're not always in harmony with each other. And it's through that process that we hope that we'll hear the voice of the Holy Spirit. Because in the end, the Plenary Council is about us trying to find the way that God is calling us forward, which may or may not be the same as what I would like to see us doing, or you would like us to see us doing, or somebody else. That's the great strength of it. It's also the great challenge of it. And I think I'm experiencing in myself, and I'm sure many of the other members are, that the letting go of personal agendas so as to be really open to hearing what other people are saying so that we can together weigh it up and test it to see whether it's in harmony with the scriptures, with our church tradition, all of those kinds of things. That's the challenge. I think I'd have to be honest and say I think we're doing a little better than I had thought we might, but there are still challenges ahead because everyone who's listening to the two of us today, Jamie, will know how tightly we hold on to our own beliefs and our own convictions and our own desires. Letting go so that we can hear and feel the Spirit leading us, that's the big challenge.
You've spoken a little bit about these challenges. Can you elaborate a little bit on that what has been some of these challenges during this first assembly, and how would you like to see these overcome?
Well, in one sense, I suppose I've addressed the main one, and I think it is a challenge that we all face in the life of the church. How do I hold together in tension, perhaps, what I feel within myself, in my own heart, as I read the scriptures and I listen to what I believe is the voice of the Spirit speaking to me? How do I hold that in tension with the fact that other people in the same, having the same experience, are seemingly hearing something very different and maybe even quite contradictory? So I think that's a real challenge. And it's a challenge for every single one of us. It's a challenge for each one of us to be prepared to listen, to be prepared to let go, to be prepared to be open to the leadings of the Spirit, but also be prepared to take time. And I think perhaps that's the other challenge. We naturally want results straight away. And I think that's one of the things that the members of the council are struggling with at the moment. I think there are many of us who would like to see some very concrete proposals and decisions made by the end of this first week. But as we said at the start, this is an 8-month process with a second assembly at the end, and I think it will be there that decisions emerge. So that inbuilt tendency to get results and get them quickly and get moving on them, we've got to kind of keep that in check a little bit, because the way the Spirit works is often a slower, more reflective journey, really, that we all need to undertake. So that's a hard lesson for many of us to come to grips with. I think many of us are struggling with it, but I do think we're making progress.
So one of the points that has also emerged, Your Grace, in recent days is the need for cultural rather than structural change. What sort of culture would you like to see emerge from the process of the Plenary Council?
It's one of the central questions for us, I think, Jamie, and just to fill it out a little bit, I think we often think, and this came through, for example, during the Royal Commission into child sexual abuse, and it comes through all sorts of other places as well, we think that if we change the structures, we will have solved everything. And there may be some need for changes in structure, but changes in structure will not achieve anything unless there's a change of heart. And I guess when we talk about a change of culture, we're probably talking about a change of heart. But my understanding of it is this. If we think about Australia, for example, we're a society that in one sense has our own Australian culture, but in another sense doesn't, because there's the wonderful Indigenous cultures that are part of our story. There's the original Irish Catholic culture that was part of our story. There are these various waves of people coming and settling in Australia which bring their own, not just religious, but social cultures with them. So rather than having an Australian culture, I think we're in a process of growing into a culture. But whatever culture you're talking about, as Christians, we always have to be prepared to allow our culture, including the church's culture, that is the way of doing things, the way of operating, the way of understanding things, to allow our cultures constantly to come into dialogue with what I call the culture of the gospel. Because the culture of the gospel is also a reality. It's based on Jesus, how Jesus thinks, how Jesus speaks, how Jesus acts. That's what culture is all about. We'll only be a faithful church, and in the end the Plenary Council must be about helping us to become a more faithful church. We'll only be a faithful church if we are constantly prepared to let our ways of doing things, in a sense, be confronted by the gospel or come into dialogue with the gospel, so that we make sure that we're building a gospel culture for the church in Australia, which is also at the same time deeply planted in Australia, and therefore the Australian way of living the gospel culture. It's quite a complex process, but I think that's what it's all about.
Thank you very much for your time today, Grace.
Grace,
and we look forward to speaking with you more over the next few months.
Thanks, Jamie. Great to be with you.